Hey guys, welcome back to Interesting Bit on Wild Rift. So Zyra back with the tier list for patch 4.4c, and honestly it's been quite some time since we did a tier list. I think the last one we did was patch 4.4, so I don't think we did it for 4.4a and 4.4b, but honestly I don't think that there have been too many changes between the patches, and I honestly haven't changed the tier list up all that much, which of course, as we get into the tier list itself, we will of course see what exactly are the changes that I have made. But honestly, for the most part, it's pretty similar. So first up, obviously here we have the Baron lane. So you can see that at the top of the pecking order, it's still the same. I still think Ornn and Garen are basically the two best tanks. Then Wukong is sort of like a mixture. Like, he's pretty tanky, but he has, of course, a little bit of damage as well, and a huge teamfight engaged. Now, I still think Sion is actually one of the best Baron laners if you can play him properly, because honestly, you can create so much pressure, whether you're building like full lethality, or you're building like hull breaker, or you're building full tank. Basically you're a really good split pusher whichever build you go, and you can create so much pressure if you understand how to play macro properly, and most people in Wild Rift just cannot deal with it. Most teams in Wild Rift just cannot deal with it. They don't have the coordination necessary, and he just gets so many towers for free. Sometimes he gets free kills because they send one person to stop him, and he's just so strong. Simply because the player base doesn't really have the ability to deal with split pushing effectively, and he's a really good split pusher. So Gwen obviously recently just got buffed. I already thought that she was very strong, especially because I think the best Baron laners are like the tanks. Like, if you're playing like Garen, Ornn, and stuff, Gwen of course is gonna be really good into them. And taking a look at some other changes that I've made, I mean, technically there are no real changes that I made for the rest of the tier list, or any of the tier list. Actually, I don't think I actually changed anything in Baron lane, but Renekton of course got buffed since the last time, and I still think he's in the same spot. I don't think he's going into S plus tier. And Aatrox is sort of the same deal. Obviously, Fiora and Camille are really strong split pushers as well, and something to note is I do think Yone is a very strong champion, but I think his matchups in Baron lane are pretty bad. Like, there's not a lot of people that he can kill in Baron lane very easily, because most of the Baron laners are either tanks or not, they're relatively tanky. Like, for example, you're not gonna be able to kill Wukong or like Gwen that easily. So I still think that Yone is not really the best in the Baron lane, but I do think he's really good in the mid lane, which we'll cover very soon. But before we cover mid lane, we're gonna have to first talk about the jungle. So in the jungle, the top of the tier list remains relatively similar. We still have Kayn, Kha'Zix, and Lee Sin as the three strongest champions. I think that the order is a little bit interchangeable. Like, Lee Sin could be the best, Kha'Zix could be the best, so could Kayn. All of them are just really strong at, are really good at like snowballing, really good at getting kills in the early game. I mean, Kha'Zix does have to kind of full clear once first, but either way, most junglers full clear nowadays. Basically, they're all just really strong junglers. They do a lot of damage, can escape really easily, a lot of mobility, and can just assassinate you really strong. Evelynn is sort of the same, except that she relies mostly on invisibility instead of actual dashes and stuff. And Hecarim, I think, is actually the best tank jungler. I think Hecarim and lethality is pretty bad. I think Hecarim is actually really good as a tank, because obviously he has so much movement speed, he can always catch up to you, and he can just keep on pressing Q on you, because he can take so much damage when he builds tank, and I think he's probably the best tank jungler. And Gwen, I still think is really good in the jungle, but she's really weak early game, and her first clearance stuff is not very good. Rammus is a champion I think a lot of people underrate, because they don't really think he's very good, but in reality he's an amazing ganker. He no longer even gets slowed by his W, and against an ADC meta, Rammus is so OP, because nowadays you see like 2-3 ADCs like in a team sometimes. I even seen like a team with 4 ADCs. So yeah, Rammus is just really strong. And Fiddlesticks is someone I wanted to point out. So I think that Fiddlesticks is honestly at this point barely hanging on to the S tier. And the reason I say this is because I think at this point most people have figured out how to play against Fiddlesticks, which is the fact that he has like kind of the problem that some junglers have, like, who are really weak in early game, like problems like champions like, for example, like Gwen and Twitch and stuff. He cannot fight early on in the jungle. Like, if you get invaded, you cannot fight anyone. You're not gonna win against any jungler like 1v1. So basically the trick is to just spam invade him, basically, and he cannot farm. You can just steal farm from him, you might even kill him, and you either get farm from him for free, get a free kill on him, or you force his team to respawn, and hopefully you don't die. And if you are wary of lanes rotating and you invade him and lanes rotate, you're gonna waste their time and you're gonna, make it such that they don't get minions and they lose lane parity, etc. And Fiddlesticks is just has a lot of areas you can take advantage of, but at the same time, he is still pretty strong. If you are untouched in your jungle, you can still farm up well, and you can of course get fed, through those surprise ults and stuff. So he still has a lot of potential, but I see him quickly dropping down the tier list. Like, he's already at the bottom of S tier. He might even drop further if more and more people know how to play against him. It's sort of like Twitch jungle. Speaking of which, I'm putting him at the bottom of A, and there's a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, his jungle clear sucks. Like, when you clear your red side, and any other jungler is going to be done clearing their entire jungle. His clear is absolutely horrendous. And his jungle clear got nerfed like a couple of times, and at this point in time, I think that Twitch jungle is near unplayable because his jungle clear is so horrible. The only reason why he's finding success is because some people still don't know how to play against him. But even so, I believe now the majority of the player base knows you have to plop the control ward down, and you have to make sure you can see him coming. So even then, he's not really that effective in the jungle because most people know that you have to put control wards, then you can see him coming. And really, I have seen instances of Twitch jungle snowballing, but more often than not, I think Twitch jungle is a flop. So I don't really think Twitch jungle is really good anymore, and I'm dropping him down in the tier list, by quite a bit. So some other champions I want to cover. Xin Zhao did get a buff, but I don't think it's enough to move him into S tier. I still think he's a pretty one-dimensional champion that is just a really strong early game and not too strong after that. Of course, I had a couple of games where I play with or against a Xin Zhao who gets Giga fed, and it's really hard to deal with him after that. But those games only happen from time to time. If you're like even or whatnot, you're not really that good. Aatrox Lethality is really, really popular in the jungle, but it's a super duper snowbally pick and super duper feast or famine. It's like playing Draven in the jungle. If you get a hit, you basically just start one-shotting everybody like Draven when he gets 2-3 kills in the early game. But if you get behind, you die 2 times, the game is basically over for you because you basically are going to be permanently behind. You're not going to do enough damage and you're going to be super duper squishy and just die, right? So Yone, his jungle clear of course did get nerfed a couple of times. Lately, of course, his Q damage on jungle monsters got nerfed. So his jungle clear is a lot worse, but of course he's a really strong champion. I just think that in the jungle there are a lot better choices than Yone. Yone is not really the best ganker because he needs some setup. He needs to charge up his Q to get the knock-up dash thingy. And also his ult is not something you can just throw in the lane. You kind of need somebody to CC because most of the time his ult is pretty easy to dodge if you didn't, if the enemy team is not already CC'd. So I don't think he's that good in the jungle, but I think he's really good in the mid lane. So we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. Mid lane, I think that Yone and Yasuo, the Wind Brothers, are genuinely the 2 best champions now, assuming you can actually play them correctly. Now, I've seen so many Yones and so many Yasuos who are really trash at the champion and make them look really bad. But of course, I've also encountered the ones that are actually good, and the good Yones and Yasuos just take over games no matter what. The first thing is that of course Yone has been getting buffed a couple of times. Lately they just buffed his W by a lot. Secondly, shield bow got buffed. And the shield bow is really, really good on them. The shield is huge. And next up, Solari Charge Blade just got buffed, which is also a very common first item for both Yone and Yasuo, the other being Bork for Yone. And then also aside from that, Bloodthirster is still a very, very strong item. So basically the 3 most important crit items to them, of course the Bloodthirster, the Charge Blade, as well as Shield Bow are all really strong right now. And Yasuo also has this tanky build thing where he goes Divine Sunder and tank items as well, which is basically makes him super duper easy to play because you don't really get punished so much for your mistakes. And honestly, I think that these 2 are just by far the best mid laners. I think Xylamir is close behind. Ever since his nerf, he's been getting banned a lot less. And basically, most people who play him actually know how to play him properly. Honestly, it's quite surprising how most Vladimirs I see play pretty well. And most of the time, they actually get, pretty fed majority of matches, which is pretty surprising to me. But he's a little bit weak in the early game, but in the later stages of the game, he's really, really strong. When you hit 2 items onwards, he's really strong. And yeah, he's just really, really good. So I have actually 3 more champions in the S plus tier because I still think Zed, Akali, and Zoe are just really, really strong. I didn't want to really drop Zoe down to S, even though I kind of want to limit S plus to 5 champions. Because I do think that Zoe is in the same league as the S plus tier champions and not the S tier champions, who haven't really changed. I haven't really changed pretty much the entire tier list except for moving Yasuo and Yone up to the S plus tier and reordering the S plus tier just a little bit because I think that the rest of the tier list just kind of remains the same. Mages are still incredibly strong. Like S tier are basically all mages and Corki. And yeah, the A plus tier champions are pretty much like the rest of the mages and like also some of the non-mage mid laners. But yeah, I do think that Yasuo and Yonya are pretty much the best right now. But now we're gonna talk about my favorite part, which is talking about ADCs. So for ADCs, Kaisa and Tristana still sit atop the mountain, but a huge change is Ezreal. So Ezreal moved up from like the top of A plus to the bottom of S plus. That's a huge jump. Why? He got 3 buffs in one patch, which is not the latest patch, but patch 4.4b. Basically, his Q got buffed. I think his base stats got buffed as well. Of course, Kraken Slayer got buffed, which in my opinion is Ezreal's best rune. So Kraken Slayer got buffed. And also, Triforce got buffed because it cost 200 gold less. So literally, he got buffed in 3 ways. His item got buffed, his rune got buffed, and he got buffed. Like, that's like a triple buff to Ezreal. And Ezreal is super duper strong. How strong he is Ezreal is able to kill Draven level 1 in lane. Like, just think about that. Ezreal versus Draven, like 1v1, Ezreal just wins, which is insane. Like, I've had like level 1s where I poked Draven like once or twice, and then we go like all in, and because of Kraken Slayer, I actually kill Draven before he kills me, which is completely bonkers. Like, you can see it in 2 ways. Either like how weak is Draven or like how strong is Ezreal. I just think it's a case of how strong is Ezreal. Like, why does he do so much damage at like level 1? And like he does so much damage throughout the game. So Ezreal is just super duper strong. The next change is of course the addition of Sivir, who came of course in 4.4b. Sivir, I think, even before the nerf, I don't think she's that strong of a champion, because I feel that the main issue with Sivir is she kind of sucks in like 1v1s, and like 2v2 she's not that good as well. She kind of needs like, at least 3 to 4 enemy champions to be up against her before she really starts to show her strength. Because majority of the damage that she gets is from her ricochets. So when you're in like team fights, like if there's a lot of team fights like 5v5s, Sivir becomes one of the best ADCs. She's probably better than Ezreal. In that case, like she's probably gonna be like behind Tristana and Kaisa, who I still think are kind of the best if you can play them properly. But I think Sivir is one of the best like team fight ADCs. Like she bounces all the ricochets and the whole enemy team just takes a huge ton of damage. Of course, like one of the problems of Sivir is the fact that the whole enemy takes damage equally, so you generally have like a whole enemy team on like 1 HP and like no one dies kind of situation, which is a little bit unfortunate, but the team fight damage output is just insane. So I do think Sivir is in the S tier, but I think she is below the other champions. I still think Jinx, like Caitlyn and Zyra are just better for like their own reasons. Like Jinx is just a better hyper carry than Sivir, and like more reliable in team fights than or like not even team fights, but like 1v1s, 2v2s, etc. than Sivir. Caitlyn's just really strong in lane and like in the later stages of the game, and Kai'Sa's a really good counter pick into certain comps. Zeri I've actually moved down from S to A plus tier because I played Zeri quite a bit. And honestly, I kind of feel like she isn't really on the same power level as someone like Jinx or Caitlyn. I think she's more closer to the power level of like like your Ashes, your Twitches, and your Dravens and stuff. So I dropped her to the top of A plus, but she's like barely like in between S and A plus. And of course, Ashe really underrated, but I still think she's really strong. I've been dropping a ton of Ashe videos lately, and really trying to show you why she's really strong. Twitch is probably it's not the worst hyper carry because you do have Vayne, and yeah, Twitch isn't doing too well at the moment. And I've actually forgotten to move Varus up. So Varus shouldn't actually be in A tier. He actually got buffed, and the buff actually did make quite a big change. So he probably should be at somewhere in the middle of A plus tier, maybe before Samira, like between Corki and Samira. Varus should be up there, because with that lethality, Varus is actually now super duper strong, and the poke is actually pretty insane. As well as of course popping the blight, gives a lot more damage and stuff. So I think Varus, the buff surprisingly actually made Varus quite a lot stronger in terms of his lethality build, but I still think the other builds are not too good for Varus at the current stage. So I forgot to change that, a little bit of a visual error, but I'm explaining it verbally. Hopefully you guys can understand. And we're gonna move on to support. Alrighty, so last but not least, we have support. And honestly, support, I've changed up quite a number of things. I do still think Lux is kind of still the best support, because she can, of course, go full AP and or like actual support. I think Soraka is kind of close behind. Just healing is a little bit too insane. Yumi's really good if you're playing with someone, but even in solo queue, I still think it's pretty good as long as someone on your team is doing well. But the main changes are, number one, I moved Pyke up. So I actually think Pyke is really strong, but the main reason why I didn't move him up before is because I duo queue a lot, and like the person I duo with bans Pyke very often, so I do not really get to play against the Pyke very much, or with a Pyke for that matter. So after I played a little bit, I played a lot on my own actually recently. I solo queued a lot on my own, and I played against Pyke a lot, and I felt that Pyke is honestly really strong. Like he can take a lot of damage and use his great health to like regenerate back. He can find so many picks, and he can execute people, etc. I think he's really strong if you're good at playing him, but if you're bad at him, he can be one of the worst champions because you just miss every hook, you don't hit your stuns, etc. So of course good Pykes are going to be really, really strong. And Karma is another one that I think is really, really underrated. So I moved her up by like 2 or 3 spots. Simply because I think that Karma does way too much damage. Like, they buffed her up a couple of times as well, which I don't think makes sense because I think that she was strong all along. And like her Q can do like half of your health. Like the empowered Q can do like half of your health. You get like guaranteed stun with like your W, and like your ult is like a huge team fight spell. Like she's just way too strong. Some other changes that I want to highlight is of course firstly, Sona. So Sona, I've actually moved her up from B to A, but personally, I really feel that Sona is not that strong. Like, her Q poke got increased a bit, but that's not really important. Her W healing and shielding actually got reduced, which is actually made it worse. Her ult, of course, is now hits a lot more people, because compared to just one straight line, you now have a huge circle, so it's more likely you're gonna hit everybody for ult, and you get that slight slow. Slight slow is not very important, but guaranteeing you hit your ult on everybody is pretty much the main, not the main buff, but the second main buff that she's getting. The main buff she's getting is the stun. So I do think the stun has made her a lot better, but I don't think it made her like an amazing support. I think she's definitely better and she's playable. Like last time she was unplayable because she was like a cannon minion in lane. Now she can at least poke and like stun people in lane. So I do think that it has made her better, but I honestly just don't think it has made her good. Lastly, I've actually moved, actually not lastly, I moved up Galio from B to A as well, because I think I played against some Galio supports recently. I don't think he's that bad. And Blitzcrank, I moved up from C to B, because I played with Blitzcrank a couple of matches recently, and I honestly think Blitzcrank does have a pretty significant impact. Like, on one hand, you could say that if he misses every hook or the enemy team is good at dodging, he's useless, but on the other hand, you could also say that if he can hit hooks, then he's like very useful because like he gets you free kills. So honestly, he might even be higher than B, but I'm just a little bit skeptical, so I've just moved him up by like 1 tier. Might move him up by more in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much it for our tier list. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.